Have you ever caught yourself saying, "I cannot change anything because of the system, because of my parents, because of my boss, because of society"? It sounds harmless. It even sounds true. But Viktor Frankl, a man who survived the concentration camps, would tell you that this single thought is more dangerous than you realize. Because every time you say it, you hand over your power. You sign away the one thing that no one else should own: your freedom to choose. Modern culture is drowning in victimhood. Everywhere you look, people are rehearsing the same lines. I cannot succeed because the rules are rigged. I cannot be happy because others have treated me unfairly. I cannot move forward because the world has turned against me. The language is familiar. It is seductive. It is the language of helplessness, and society rewards it. Victims get attention. Victims get sympathy. Victims even get a strange kind of moral authority. On social media, the louder the cry of injustice, the more validation it receives. But here is the brutal truth. Society may reward the victim, but life does not. Life is merciless toward those who abandon their own agency. Frankl discovered this in the darkest place on earth. Stripped of his family, his work, his dignity, he realized there was still one freedom no one could take: the freedom to choose his attitude toward suffering. He was not naive. He knew pain was real. But he also knew that once you stop rehearsing the story of being a victim, a different story begins. When you refuse to play the victim, you discover that the power you thought was gone has been waiting for you all along. Why do we so easily fall into the role of the victim? The answer is not simple, but Frankl and modern psychology point to three powerful forces. The first is our fear of existential responsibility. Freedom sounds beautiful until you realize what it demands. To be free is to accept that your life is your own to shape. That means the weight of your choices, the failures you cannot blame on anyone else, the mistakes that were yours alone. For many, this is unbearable, so we escape. We hand off responsibility by telling ourselves we are powerless. I cannot change because the system is broken. I cannot grow because my parents damaged me. I cannot risk because society will crush me. Each excuse feels like protection, but it is a trap. By declaring ourselves powerless, we escape responsibility, but we also abandon freedom. Frankl warned that this trade is deadly. The moment you refuse responsibility, you surrender the only ground you truly stand on. The second force is more deceptive. It is the hidden reward society gives to victims. In our culture, suffering has become a kind of currency. The one who suffers most seems to hold the highest moral ground. On social media, victimhood is broadcast like a badge of honor. Entire movements are built on the idea that pain alone entitles you to authority, and there is a rush that comes with it. The likes, the sympathy, the attention, but what looks like power is counterfeit. Because in the real world, playing the victim does not build resilience, it corrodes it. It may win applause in the short term, but it silently teaches you to expect the world to rescue you, instead of learning how to stand on your own feet. This is not empowerment. It is dependency disguised as virtue. The third force runs even deeper into the roots of childhood. Psychologist Martin Seligman called it learned helplessness. Imagine a child who speaks up and is ignored, who tries and is ridiculed, who asks for love and is denied. Over time, that child stops asking. He lowers his hand. He stops trying. He learns that effort is useless, that nothing he does matters. This is the seed of victimhood. But Frankl's life proves that even when helplessness is learned, it can be unlearned. He stood in the midst of a death camp, surrounded by forces infinitely larger than himself, and still chose his response. He showed that the chain of helplessness can be broken. It does not happen overnight, but it begins the moment you stop saying, "I cannot," and start asking, "What can I do, however small?" These three roots, fear of responsibility, the social rewards of victimhood, and the helplessness learned early in life explain why so many fall into this role. They are powerful, but not final, because Frankl reminds us of one unshakable truth. Even if every freedom is taken, the freedom to choose your attitude remains. This is where the victim role begins to collapse. When you realize that victimhood is not destiny, it is a decision, and every decision can be unmade. If the roots of victimhood explain why it begins, the psychology explains why it holds on so tightly. Once a man steps into the role, there are powerful forces inside his mind that keep him there. The first force is the story he tells himself. Narrative control. Every person carries a story about who they are. For the victim, that story becomes a prison. I am the one who was betrayed. I am the one who was abandoned. I am the one who was denied what I deserved. The details may differ, but the theme is always the same. I am powerless because of what others did to me. And like any story repeated long enough, it becomes identity. You begin to confuse what happened to you with who you are. Frankl warned that this is the most dangerous mistake, because once you make your suffering your definition, you guarantee it will never leave you. The prison walls are built not of iron, but of words. The second force is the illusion of short-term relief. Victimhood offers comfort in the moment. When you say, "I cannot do anything," you lower the unbearable weight of responsibility. When you cry out, "It is not my fault," you receive sympathy, sometimes even admiration. For a moment, the pain softens. But the cost is high. Each time you take this relief, you surrender more of your strength. You stop developing resilience. You stop practicing courage. What felt like safety in the moment becomes weakness over time. The victim gains comfort today, but pays with his power tomorrow. As Frankl might put it, victimhood is anesthesia for the soul. It numbs you now, but it ensures you never heal. The third force is the external locus of control. Victims believe their lives are controlled entirely by others, by chance, by systems they cannot touch. If only my boss were different, if only the economy were better, if only my family had treated me right. This belief is seductive because it makes suffering someone else's responsibility. But Frankl, in the heart of the camps, refused this lie. He said that while every freedom can be stripped away, one cannot. The freedom to choose your response, and in that response lies your true power. External events may shape your circumstances, but they do not dictate your spirit. The victim gives away that spirit by insisting control lies only outside himself. These psychological forces are why the victim role can last for years, even decades. The story feels true. The relief feels good. The belief feels safe. But all three are traps, and the longer you remain in them, the more you forget that escape is even possible. Yet Frankl's life and work remind us that these traps are not unbreakable. They are choices disguised as inevitabilities, and once you see them as choices, you can begin to choose differently. When a man accepts the role of the victim, the damage does not stay contained. It spreads. It corrodes the inside of his mind, his relationships, his society, and finally, his very sense of self. The first wound is internal. The man who sees himself as a victim loses meaning. He lives in bitterness, always rehearsing the unfairness of life. Anxiety rises because he feels no control. Depression deepens because the future looks like nothing more than a repeat of the past. Frankl warned that man can endure suffering if it has meaning, but the victim strips suffering of meaning. All that remains is pain with no purpose, and that is the most unbearable weight of all. A man without power suffers, but a man without meaning collapses. The second wound appears in relationships. No one thrives in the presence of endless victimhood. At first, others may offer sympathy, but over time, the victim becomes a drain. Friends feel exhausted, partners feel trapped and predators take advantage. Because when a man declares himself powerless, those who seek control find easy prey. The victim thinks his cries for help protect him, but often they expose him. Frankl knew that dignity is the armor of the human spirit. Without it, you invite either abandonment or manipulation. A man who lives as a victim will eventually find himself either isolated or exploited. The third wound infects society. We live in what some call a culture of victimhood, where the loudest claim of injury wins the highest moral ground. Frankl saw the danger of this decades ago. A society that glorifies suffering without responsibility kills responsibility itself. When every group, every individual insists on being the greater victim, the public square becomes a contest of weakness, not strength. And when weakness is rewarded, courage dies. The victim mentality multiplied across millions erodes the foundation of freedom, because a nation of victims cannot govern itself. It waits to be governed. The fourth wound is the slow decay of the self. Victimhood stunts growth. It teaches a man to stop trying, to stop risking, to stop imagining what might be possible. Over time, he becomes a shadow of who he could have been, not because others stopped him, but because he stopped himself. Frankl believed that man is destroyed not by suffering, but by surrendering to it. The victim does not lose because of what others have done. He loses because he refused to step forward. This is the quiet tragedy of victimhood. It is not the blow from outside that ruins a man. It is the choice inside to never rise again. So the consequences are clear. Victimhood steals meaning, poisons relationships, corrupts society, and erodes the self. It is not harmless. It is not noble. It is not strength disguised. It is decay dressed up as innocence. Frankl's life reveals the opposite path. He faced the same temptation to collapse, to surrender, to curse fate. But he refused. And in that refusal, he found a freedom deeper than circumstance. In the darkest place imaginable, Viktor Frankl discovered the truth that would shape his life's work. He lost his family. He lost his career. He lost his freedom. Day after day, he was stripped of food, dignity, and hope. The camps were designed to crush not only the body, but the spirit. Many men did collapse. Many gave up. But Frankl noticed something strange. There were prisoners who, despite the same hunger and humiliation, carried themselves with a kind of inner strength. They would share their last piece of bread. They would whisper words of comfort to others. They suffered, but they did not surrender. Frankl realized that while everything else could be taken away, one freedom remained untouched: the freedom to choose one's attitude. He could not control the guards. He could not escape the barbed wire, but he could choose his response to suffering. This was not denial. He did not pretend the camps were anything but hell. But he discovered that even in hell, man is free to decide who he will be. That freedom cannot be stolen. It can only be surrendered. From this realization, Frankl built his life's philosophy. He called it logotherapy, the belief that man's deepest drive is not pleasure or power, but meaning. Meaning turns suffering into endurance. Meaning transforms pain into purpose. Frankl wrote, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. The victim asks, why me? The man of strength asks, what now?" This was his medicine, stronger than food or comfort. He saw men survive the camps not because their bodies were strong, but because their spirits found meaning. A father who lived to see his child again. A scientist who dreamed of finishing his work. A prisoner who chose to suffer with dignity rather than collapse in despair. Frankl's discovery is the turning point. The role of the victim shatters when you understand that meaning can never be stolen. And once you refuse to surrender that meaning, your power begins to return. Frankl's insights were not meant to stay in the pages of books. They were meant to be lived. If victimhood is a choice, then freedom is also a choice. And that freedom begins with daily practice. These 6 principles can guide the way. The first principle is to identify your victim narrative. Every victim repeats a story. I was betrayed. I was mistreated. I was denied my chance. Write that story down. Look at the words carefully. Ask yourself, is this a description of an event, or is this a definition of me? An event can be survived. A definition becomes a cage. You are not the story of what happened to you. You are the one who chooses how the story ends. The second principle is to translate why me into what now. This is the pivot Frankl made in the camps. Why me leads nowhere. It loops endlessly. What now turns your eyes forward. The moment you ask what now, even in despair, the ground shifts beneath you. You stop rehearsing the injustice and begin searching for the next action. Change the question, and the course of your life begins to change with it. The third principle is to choose your attitude deliberately. You do not control the storm, but you are still the captain of the ship. Every day, in every circumstance, there is a choice of attitude. Will I meet this with bitterness or with resolve? Will I collapse or will I endure? Attitude may seem small, but it is the hinge on which freedom turns. Frankl's defiance in the camps was not in fighting guards with fists, but in refusing to let them dictate his inner stance. The fourth principle is radical responsibility. Ask yourself in every situation, what part of this can I control, however small? And then act on it. Maybe you cannot fix the entire system, but you can fix how you show up to work. Maybe you cannot erase your past, but you can choose how you carry it today. Radical responsibility does not mean blaming yourself for everything. It means claiming power over the one arena that always belongs to you, your response. A single step taken in responsibility can break chains that years of complaint never will. The fifth principle is to seek meaning in suffering. This is Frankl's deepest lesson. Pain itself can crush you, but pain given meaning can transform you. Meaning can come from love, from work, or even from enduring with dignity. A man can carry incredible burdens if he believes they serve a purpose larger than himself. The victim suffers without purpose and withers. The man who finds meaning suffers with direction and grows stronger. If your suffering has meaning, it ceases to be meaningless suffering. It becomes the ground on which you rise. The sixth principle is to reclaim action in small daily steps. The victim waits for rescue. The free man acts even in the smallest ways. 1 workout, 10 minutes of learning, 3 lines in a journal. These acts may seem trivial, but each is a vote against victimhood. They build momentum. They prove to you every day that you are not powerless. You are moving, choosing, acting. Over time, these small acts accumulate into resilience. They turn the story of victimhood into the story of recovery. Together, these 6 principles form a path. Recognize your story, change your question, choose your attitude, claim your responsibility, find meaning, take daily action. None of these steps erases suffering, but each one reclaims freedom from the grip of victimhood. And once you begin walking this path, you discover what Frankl saw in the camps. That even in the most desperate conditions, man is never without choice. And in that choice lies the power to transform everything. When you step out of the victim role, do not expect applause, expect resistance. The first resistance comes from others. People around you have grown used to your weakness. Some even depended on it. Your passivity made them comfortable. Your helplessness made them feel powerful. When you stop playing the victim, you upset the balance. Do not be surprised if some people pull away. Do not be shocked if others try to drag you back. A few may even resent your strength because it reminds them of their own surrender. The second resistance comes from within. When you leave the victim role, you leave behind a community, however false. Misery loves company, and victimhood often creates its own tribe. When you rise above it, you may feel a strange loneliness. The sympathy and validation you once received will be gone. In its place is silence, but that silence is fertile ground. Better to stand alone in strength than to stay crowded in helplessness. The third resistance is the daily battle itself. Freedom is not a one-time decision. It is a discipline. Each day, you will face the temptation to collapse back into blame, to surrender to the easy comfort of powerlessness. Frankl warned that freedom must be chosen again and again. The world will test you. Your mind will test you. And yet, every time you refuse the victim role, you strengthen the muscle of resilience. So expect resistance, expect loneliness, expect the challenge to return tomorrow. But also expect this. Each refusal makes you stronger. Each day you reject victimhood, your power grows. Suffering is inevitable, but victimhood is a choice. Pain will visit every life, yet it does not have to define yours. The moment you stop asking who harmed me and start asking what will I do next, you reclaim power. The victim surrenders to circumstance. The free man shapes it. Meaning is the light that guides you through darkness. When you find your why, you can endure anyhow. So here is your challenge. For the next 30 days, refuse the victim role. Comment, "I refuse," and begin the discipline of freedom today.